What's up, bro? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to the conversation of the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to talk to my next guest. She has no idea why, but
Oh,
I am such a fan of hers. And audience, as you know, I am a fan of directors and producers because they have the chance to really set the tone for the projects and things that are presented to us. Don't get me wrong, actors, I love you. But there's something special, unique about producers and directors that I just stand over. And audience, I just want to get right to it. She has directed and produces some of my favorites and some of your favorites, including one that is hot right now, which is Winning Time, and also too Gilded Age. I didn't even know she was doing Gilded Age, and so she's here to talk about Winning Time. But I'm definitely going to ask her about Gilded Age too, as well. The incredible, the talented, the actor, now director Salli Richardson Whitfield. What's happening?
oh, wonderful to see you. Yeah, Gilded Age, Winning Time, same kind of show, right? Same thing exactly.
It's exactly well, when you think about like dynasties, maybe, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, and in essence, Winning Time is a period piece, in
Yeah.
essence,
Yes,
right?
yes,
You know, kind
true.
of thing. But that's why I wanted to talk with you, Sally, is because I love the range that I have. I love the different rooms that I can walk into. I love the different topics that I'm interested in and the conversations I can have. And me and my buddy, we were just laughing about that yesterday. I literally went from like talking hip hop in the morning on my morning show to going to the US Open in the suite to being in this like art people who serve on the moments board discussing random art and then ended at this French restaurant all in like a day. And so I love range. And I think when people have range, it just makes life so much more rich. And so that's why I've always been curious about you and your range. Where do you get your sense of curiosity from?
Well, I think that as far as filmmaking, I love to watch different kind of shows all the time. I don't have one genre. And as an artist and a director now, I want to challenge myself in all those different formats. Um, and that's why doing Winning Time was so exciting for me. Obviously, I mean, not obviously, but I love basketball. I grew up playing in high school, and the opportunity to recreate Lakers, Celtics, 80s, and to conquer that basketball. It's like doing a huge action sequence, and I love action. And so I don't know, it's been the hardest job I've ever had. but
Yeah.
uh but so far the most rewarding.
Are you a lover of history by chance?
Probably my history teachers would not say so. Although during this, the same thing as Gilded, and Lakers or Winning Time, I have had an opportunity to really enjoy learning a topic I didn't know so much about. Coming into Winning Time, I read Jeff Pearlman's book, and it was so fascinating. You think you know a little bit about 80s Lakers, but you don't really until you read Jeff's book. Same thing with the Gilded Age. Learned so much about, oh my God, about etiquette. Lord, I know way too much.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I'm asking that is because, like you, I was not a lover of history growing up, right? And I did, all the things everyone else did, all the AP Europeans, the histories, a lot of this, to that. And I was just so bored by it. And it wasn't until I met this gentleman who was a retired history professor from West Point, and we used to get together about once a month just because I just loved hearing how he told stories about history. Really told me about like the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts, the Transcontinental Railroad, but the way he said it and told it, Sally, was so visual, right? Like I could actually see it, right? And it made it so interesting. And I think that is something special about your work. Like you really take like these period pieces, and I am calling Winning Time a period piece, right? Because it is a very specific time period, right? And you have a way of giving such history and context and provenance, and that you bring these visualizations to life. Like all these things we've heard of about, the Lakers and the dynasties, but yet you made it so visual, right? And I'm just curious, like, what was your I guess strategy in terms of grounding, like the becoming of the big time franchise contracts, right? Like really defining, ESPN and broadcast, right? Like I love that. I love when I can learn about the makings of.
Well, I think our challenge this season, honestly, me visually, was how do I, how do I show these scenes and how do we depict these, especially these big basketball sequences that people know? They know the outcome. And so, how do we shoot it in a way that we almost fool you that maybe it won't be the outcome that you already know is going to happen? I think that obviously I did that with, in partnership with our writers who really, wove this very complicated, fast moving storyline this season in a way that, again, you can still enjoy it if you know what's going to happen. You can enjoy it if you don't like basketball because the relationships are so, we keep saying it's like this succession type family crazy dynamic. So I don't know if I can take all the, I'm gonna have to hand that off to the writers
Yeah.
as the storyline. But my job was to make, the story and visually and the basketball in particular exciting enough that I could fool you that maybe it wasn't going to be the same outcome that you thought.
I love that. Obviously, you didn't write it, but I think as a director, you had to bring the writing to life. And so I think there's a collaboration and partnership. And I'm just talking to you because, yes, there is a team, but I'm not talking to the entire team, unfortunately. And so, like, audience, this is Salli on behalf of the team. So,
My team, their
yeah.
accolades, because honestly, when you get to a show this big, and let me tell you, this is a big machine. You need that partnership. Like honestly, my partner in crime would be Todd Van Hazel, our DP. We are out there. We are like two little jackrabbits up there with energy because there's so much going on that you really need that partner. And he set up the show initially with Adam McKay and the look of the show. And then the second season, the two of me and him were able to partner up to really kind of fine tune it. And I think the second season is spectacular. Like the first season was good, you're kind of setting it up, but this season we are knocking it out the park.
But I mean, you talked about energy, right? And you opened up episode one with a bang, right? Like the first 5 minutes is just like this complete action sequence. And so, job well done, you nailed it. I want to talk more about one particular an audience. I'm not giving anything away once you watch it. Like, there's nothing. There's no spoilers here with this next comment. One of my favorite parts of episode one was the training camp scene and the scrimmage between the two Titans, right? Magic and Kareem. Talk to us about the intent of that scene and what were you hoping to accomplish right there?
Well, we really
That
wanted.
was one of my favorite scenes.
Oh, thank you. We really, that's something that again, Todd and I really planned because, we wanted, because it's practice, we wanted it to have this raw feeling. We didn't want it to be so polished because we knew where we were going to be ending at the end of the season. Mm-hmm. So we wanted to have this kind of grimy feeling, and we didn't want, like, we saved stuff, like really like a lot of our little kind of fancy moves that would be a little too polished, we saved to later. But what's important about our basketball, and I think what you're responding to, is that we truly get the narrative inside of the game. You understand in that practice what Magic is thinking, what Kareem is feeling, what the other guys are even thinking. And that honestly, as much as, you have the big set piece of the basketball, getting that narrative of what the guys are thinking about is much harder to get those little pieces. Just the sequence of when Magic and Kareem are, like, when he throws the ball at him as he goes back, it takes a while to somehow capture that look within the game with the movement. So It's not as easy as it seems.
Well, what I was taking away from that scene was really like this underlying tension between the two of Magic and Kareem, which is a part of any dynasty team or any type of team that rises to greatness. We always hear stories up to current time and current players of friction within teams, frictions within the locker room. We've seen fights go viral in practices from teams out the West Coast. So you see like this tension. And so that's what I loved about that scene, because for me, I was getting all that visually.
Well, what's so, you kind of hit it right there is that, when there was Lakers basketball in the 80s, there was no social media. So all those things that were happening behind the scenes, you never heard about, you never got to see. And I think that's why people are so fascinated with doing a show about the Lakers in the 80s when you have such superstars. And now you can get just a little peek behind the scenes of what happened, what could have happened. And nowadays you see everything. Everything's on social media. If you're at a club and you breathe the wrong way, you gonna know about it. But we don't know anything about those guys, and I think that that's what people are really responding to.
And I thought you did a really great job with that. In particular, that sequence was such physical
Yeah,
aspect of that game. And what people, when you think about the 80s basketball, you think about the physicality of the teams like the Celtics, who had like this big man, big team in order to beat the 76ers, who was this really big team, which then the Pistons had to become like this really big, dominant, aggressive team in order to be able to get out of the Eastern Conference. And the Lakers had to compete, right, in order to have this physicality. So that gets lost in conversation is the physicality of this team, of the teams in the 80s. And that's why I'm leaning so heavy, Salli, forgive me, on that sequence and that scene, is because for me, it shows all of that within 2 minutes, which I think you're such a brilliant director, which is why I wanted to lean into that.
back then you could basketball. I could punch you in the face and it wouldn't be even called a foul. And you're right.
It
We
was,
captured that in the practice. If it was practice now, the coaches would have stopped it there. They're like, yeah, they're playing basketball. Let's get them heated. Let's get them going. Um,
yeah,
with our producers when they finally saw that sequence cut together. Um, and of course, I don't know if you've seen the finale yet, but to them that was their favorite basketball that we had done all year. They loved that sequence. And again, I think it's because it has this raw feeling and it's not so polished.
yeah, which is fantastic. Talk to me about how you guys are holding. Another thing you guys do well, I'm just curious about how did you think about this as a director? It's like you don't give us the character all at once. And so like how hard is it from a director standpoint of view, like to hold back the story arc of a character, right? And I'm thinking about the character or actually the player now, Magic Johnson, right? Like we do know what the end result is, right? But how do you keep the restraint of what to give and what not to give?
Well, I think that while we're, obviously, you need these characters to grow throughout the season. And so honestly, during scenes, we give levels. I'm like, you've done this. Okay, give me a little bit more in this. Oh, you teared up in this take. Give me one where you don't have that, because a lot of the work that happens later is in editing, where hopefully as a director, I've gotten enough choices from my actors that I can now really craft where I want the scene to go, where I want the episode again to go, and then hopefully at the end, how we want to mold the whole season. So it's about getting choices. And then also, luckily, I have the most amazing actors to work with, some new guys who are very talented. And then, then you have the John C. Rileys and, Adrian Brody, who are classic veterans who, I have this partnership and we're all working on it together. But again, this is when I say there is a team for this machine, because we all have to be thinking about it. And sometimes we're shooting scenes all over the place. And, I kind of have to watch it for them. Okay, well, remember the scene before this that we shot last week, you did this. So now we're here. So it definitely becomes this little puzzle you have to put together.
Yeah. And then next, I want to go to the idea of locations. I always think that locations are very much a secondary character. One, I'm from Lansing, Michigan. And so I love how Lansing gets used in the name so much because people just don't know about Lansing that often. And so I grew up with the Johnsons, No Magic, right? Like the whole nine. And so it's just really great to see Lansing mentioned so much. I'm like, yes. But I think those type of things help drive a narrative. And I'm curious about the choice of Peter Luger for the dinner after the draft. Was that a fictional element that you added? Or is that like, did they exactly go to Peter Luger? And then why Peter Luger as a choice of the steakhouse?
I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong on this one, so don't quote me. I'm pretty sure that they had a draft thing at Peter Luger's, and it's
Okay.
such big, it's such a big famous restaurant in New York. So it just, once you're in there, if you know the restaurant, you know what that means and you know what that history is. And it makes sense that you have all these like old time owners in Peter Luger's. So I think that's historical that it happened there, but don't quote me on that one.
No, it's totally fine. I wanted you to tee it up. I mean, that's why I said I live in New York City. It's an audience. For those of you not familiar with Peter Luger's, the provenance of Peter Luger's is it's changing over time in the current times. But like in the 80s, 90s, or 2000s, when you celebrate a big business deal, when you had an anniversary, a big birthday, like really the titans of Wall Street and the titans of advertising and Mad Men, that is where you went for Peter Luger. And so that's why, Salli, I wanted you to kind of talk about that just because it grounds, again, the moment of like this draft and this guys and these boys club, going for some steak and some wine and some cigars, right? And so that's, again, I just love provenance and history. And so that's why I was asking.
Absolutely. And you definitely get that feel. I mean, there's something about some dark wood and a whole bunch of, you already know where you are and what time period this is.
Yeah, it is. How did you think through the dynamic between, Jerry and his daughter and the dynamics? I kept thinking about like women's equity, women's pay, like women in the workforce, right? Like, how did you guys think through that dynamic as you approach like episode one? Because we're starting to see some evolutions, and that's kind of in juxtaposition to current times.
Well, and it's hard because, the show obviously is geared towards the men because it was a very male driven world in the 80s. And then, Jeannie and I really, the actress, we worked together on seeing her just start standing up for herself a little more, very subtle, and until you see her later with the different clothes. And then hopefully I'm not giving up too much. There's like
Yeah.
a between her and dad, where you really see her become the Jeannie Buss that we know she becomes in the real world and the first female owner of a team. So again, don't be mad at me again. I think a lot of that is in the writing. It's like kind of it's these little tiny, you see her growing, more and more, and hopefully if we get another season, you'll really get to see her come into her own, because I think it's important to set up Jeannie Buss because she's such an important character for the Lakers franchise.
No, it is. And I think that is why the timing of the series is so great, right? The period piece and that what is actually happening right now in current society. And so like there's these conversations of like the 80s that are actually happening right now in 2023. And so I thought that was really interesting.
And Jerry Buss was, as much as he's a bit of a chauvinist, he also gave these women an opportunity. So it's kind of like he's two people. He's like this womanizer, but also putting women in positions that really changed his organization. And again, I think that's very timely and pivotal in the story of the Lakers.
It is. I think that's the beauty of art, right? And I think when a person nails art well, right, it shows the nuance of it, right? And art isn't meant to be like this easy told visual of something, right? It's complicated, it's nuanced, right? And I think that's the beauty of it. Really quickly as we wrap, why did you do Gilded Age? Why did you decide to do that project? What attracted you to Gilded Age?
I absolutely love period pieces and I love Julian Fellows, but then also there was this wonderful Black storyline that you don't get to see in a period and done historically, and that really excited me. And I felt that, and then in particular, once I was there, that it was important for me to be there to make sure that I shepherded that story in a proper way. There are little nuances that as a Black woman, I'm going to give that storyline and things that I'm going to notice that other people necessarily wouldn't. And I think that is why the first season really resonated with people of color. But just in general, I was just a fan of that time period. And again, one more thing to conquer, a world that had not had an opportunity to conquer it. And I felt like I did.
and, You did in such a great way. Like just living here in New York or coming from Michigan, born and raised, I had heard so much about like society world of New York. And then actually getting into this space and world was a wild venture. But then seeing Gilded Age, it grounded so much. Ah, I see why this was that. Ah, I see why that street is this. For I heard about that. Right. So it just gave so much like almost like living history. And so, audience, if you have not watched Gilded Age, and if you never thought you were interested in history before, like I was, you should probably watch Gilded Age. It gives you a lot of like cultural understanding of like how societal norms work and kind of how we get into this modern day structures and really how policies of current time and our democracy end up getting broad and created and existed. If you want to talk about the 1% living in action through history, you definitely want to take up a good date.
Yeah, and how big business is run, and that it's pretty close to what it is now. It's pretty close to what's in Winning Time. It's like I love how that history mirrors Winning Time as much as it seems like something separate. It's we keep doing. Unfortunately, we keep doing the same thing over and over.
Yeah, Salli, I would love. I know you were here to talk about Winning Time, but I would love to, if whenever you get the chance or moment, doesn't have to be in time, to do an unpacking. I really want to put those two shows in conversation with each other and really pull out like historical context and provenance. So that's why I was so drawn and excited to talk to you, just because I'm like to have a director and a black director and a black female director and be able to do two different types of period pieces, but show so much parallel and symmetry and be in conversation to be able to unpack that like in a really substantive way would be super dope. I'm a little bit of a geek, Salli. And so
Yeah, because Gilded premieres sometime in October, so the second season is coming just as we're starting to end Winning Time. So HBO is trying to hit you back to back. Let's go.
so let's do it. Let's do it. But I'm letting you know, I want to be able to put them in conversation with each other. But come back. I'm really going to unpack Gilded Age as a standalone. But I do think that there's something really powerful. And I think it would draw in a new audiences to both, right? Yeah. Who will be interested in both.
How much both of these shows, even though they may not be, your genre, they speak to so many different people. You may not be into period pieces, but that storyline just kind of pulls you in. Again, as you get older, history becomes a little more exciting. And the same thing for, Winning Time. You may not be into basketball, you may not be into that history during that time, but the stories that are being woven and the importance of what's going on really will attract any viewer. So I just, encourage people to watch the show. You're going to love it. It's going to be exciting and you're going to get some great performances.
Yeah, Salli, thank you so much for your artistry and your gift. And I'll talk to you next time, my friend.
Okay, lovely. Thanks a lot.
Take care. All right, bye-bye.